We'll call our March workshop meeting to order. Welcome. So we're delighted you can join us. We're excited to have some achievements that we're going to celebrate tonight, as well as address some business. So we'll get started with Mrs. Freed calling roll.
Madam President, all are present.
Excellent. I ask that you stand and join us in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item on the agenda is our special presentations, and those will be led by Dr. Swenson.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, distinguished colleagues, fellow citizens, and honored students. It gives me great pleasure always to introduce exceptional efforts by our young people throughout our school district. And this evening, it gives me an added amount of pleasure to turn to Mr. Jim Inskeep, our athletic director at Carmel High School, because not only have the students that he is going to introduce achieved greatness, they have been historic. With that note, I will allow Mr. Inskeep to fill in the details.
Members of the board and Dr. Swenson, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. My name is Jimmy Inskeep. I'm the athletics director at Carmel High School, and I realize that you do not normally do recognitions at your workshop meetings, so we really appreciate you accommodating our request to come tonight with the swimming schedule for March. So a few words about the team, girls swimming and diving team, and their ongoing accomplishments. So if I could have those senior members and Coach Plum come forward at this time while I speak a little bit about them. I'll try not to blush too much. The Lady Hounds have continued to dominate high school swimming, not only in the state of Indiana, but throughout the country. Last month at the IUPUI Natatorium, these young ladies, these are seniors on the team, won their 27th straight state championship. And while that is just an incredible accomplishment, Coach Plum and these young ladies will tell you that each one of those years is special. And this year was very special in a lot of different ways. So I want to read over just a few of their accomplishments from that meet and say a few words before they introduce themselves and tell you what their future plans are here. The Lady Greyhounds scored 397 points at the state meet. That's a lot of points at the state meet in swimming. So it was a really, really fun day, and the second and third place scores would still not have added up to defeat the Lady Hounds. So it was a lot of domination. The girls started off the meet by winning the 200 medley relay. The team of Lacey Locke, Alex Clark, Ariana Bullard, and Veronica Burchill, setting a new state meet record, and that was a great start to the afternoon. Claire Adams won 2 individual events. She's a freshman. The 200 freestyle and the 100 backstroke, setting a state meet record in that event. The 100 butterfly was won by Ariana Bullard here this evening. The 100 freestyle was won by freshman Veronica Burchill, and the 200 freestyle relay team of Veronica Burchill, Claire Adams, Hannah House, and Ariana Bullard also won. And to wrap up the meet in fine fashion, setting another state meet record, was the 400 free relay team of Veronica Burchill, Hannah House, Claire Adams, and Lacey Locke. Lacey is also here this evening and was named the IHSA Mental Attitude Award winner. So. One of the special things about this team is that times from the state meet are then put in against other schools and individual times throughout the country to determine a mythical national champion, and really running a dual meet throughout all those top teams and times throughout the country. So they anxiously await those results next month in April. So without further ado, I'll introduce Chris Plum, and then each of the girls can come forward and introduce themselves and tell where they're going. I don't know if you want to say any words or not. Chris Plum.
Just thank you for having us tonight, and thanks to our athletic director, and thank you for your support for the continued success going forward. I'm really proud of these ladies. They've done a tremendous job. It's a lot of quote-unquote pressure to be here and to take that role as freshmen, but we wish them the best on their way out, and we thank you.
All right. Hi, I'm Ariana Bullard, and next year I'm going to West Point University.
Hi, I'm Tori Mullen, and next year I will be attending Purdue University. Hi, I'm Meredith Missler, and next year I'll be at Butler University.
Hi, I'm Madeline Aspey, and next year I'll be attending Indiana University.
Hi, I'm Jamie Skoranek, and I will be attending the University of Toledo.
Hi, I'm Lacey Locke, and I'll be attending Northwestern University.
They'd like to shake your hands. And while they're shaking hands with members of our district administration team and school board, also I'd like to say a special thanks to the many parents that are here this evening of these young ladies. Takes a lot of dedication to be a member of the team, and they do a wonderful job of getting them to all of the places they have to be at lots of odd hours, too. Thank you.
Well, congratulations, ladies. We are extremely proud and look forward to hearing how you do nationally. We're certain you will do very well. With that in mind, I'll give you a couple moments if you would like to leave and address your studies or what have you. Don't feel obligated to stay. So thank you. And with that, we will move on to consent. Do I have a motion to approve consent?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Great, consent passes. And moving on to action items. We have a number of action items that will be brought to us by Dr. Dillon.
Give us a second here for the technology to catch up with us. Good evening, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to bring back to you a group of policies that first came to you in a first reading a couple weeks ago at your last meeting. And tonight we bring to you a second reading as soon as the screen catches up. There we go. Okay. First, bring to you Bylaw 0167.5, entitled Use of School Corporation Electronic Mail by Board Members. This is a new bylaw. It was proposed by Neola and has been reviewed and modified by the Policy Committee. Bring this back to you tonight for a second reading.
May I get a motion on the table?
So moved.
Second.
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion,
Yes, please.
please.
Dr. Dillon, I'm looking at the second paragraph where there's a highlighted section which says that school corporation email addresses shall not be used to support a campaign for election/re-election to the board. I think I understand what's intended there when you say email addresses. I think you're saying that a board member shouldn't use his email account. Am I understanding that correctly?
I would believe that email addresses and email account would be interchangeable. Matter of fact, Mr. Phillips, I thought someplace in here we replaced email addresses with email account. I believe that might be the second time that that's referenced. And I certainly think we could change that with a motion from you tonight.
Just wanted to make sure I was understanding
Absolutely.
correctly.
Yes.
Thank you. Would you like to change it?
Are you moving to change it?
Well, I think Dr. Dillon said that they mean the same thing, so I guess it's not important to...
I do believe that they're interchangeable, but you see up in the first paragraph, we did make a change based upon a recommendation from you. We just did not, as a policy committee, catch that second reference.
I do have another discussion item.
Do you want to move? I'll second.
I don't wish to do violence to the hard work that's gone into this.
Oh, no, I would welcome, but I think there might be two at once because there's something else that needs to be.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
She wants to make another.
But there's one other that I'd like to highlight. In the 4th paragraph, the end of the first sentence, we need to include after is sent or received. We need to add or received to the end of the, so, and Greg and I discussed that previously, so if Greg wanted to make a motion for those two amendments, or I'm happy to make a motion for those two amendments as well.
I'd be happy for Kathy to offer the motion.
Okay, Miss Kathy. Would you like to motion to amend?
Okay, I'll try. Madam President, I would move that we would change email addresses to email accounts in all places in the paragraph, and also that we add the phrase is sent or received. Add the or received to the sentence.
Okay, we have a motion on the table to change addresses to accounts and add or receive to the end of this first sentence of the 4th paragraph.
Second.
All in favor?
Discussion?
Or, I'm sorry, discussion.
No.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so then we are moving forward with the motion. So all in favor of the amended, thank you, of the amended bylaw 0167.5.
Aye.
All in favor? Aye. Excellent. Next, please.
Thank you very much. Second policy we bring to you tonight for a second reading is Policy 1520, Evaluation of Administrators. This is a new policy for Carmel Clay Schools. It was proposed by Neola and has been reviewed and modified by the Policy Committee.
Motion to approve.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, please.
Our next policy for second reading is Policy 5130, Withdrawal from School. 5130 is a revised policy. We currently have this policy. This is a revision proposed by Neola and reviewed and modified by our Policy Committee.
Motion to approve.
I'll move.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Next.
Next policy for consideration is Policy 5200, Attendance. This is a revised policy for Carmel Clay Schools. It was proposed by Neola and has been reviewed and modified by our Policy Committee.
Approve recommendation. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And our next policy is 5464, Early Graduation. It is a revised policy for Carmel Clay Schools, was proposed to us by Neola, excuse me, and has been reviewed and modified by our Policy Committee.
Motion to approve recommendation.
So I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much, Dr. Dillon.
Thank you very much.
And then moving on to discussion, our first item is the Cable Advisory Commission, and we have Mrs. Christy Cloud.
Good evening. It's my pleasure to join you tonight to give you a brief update about the Cable Advisory Commission, which is a role that I serve on as a representative of the school district within the city of Carmel. So first wanted to start you off with just a quick view of some of the content that is provided on the city's cable channel. you through that entire presentation, but I hope that gives you a little bit of a flavor of some of the programming that you might see on the city's PEG channel. And a PEG channel actually stands for a public or educational or government channel of television that is available. The city's channel is also available not only on public television, but it is also available on their website. So we'll take you there briefly so that you can see where you might find that content.
And we have provided it at no cost.
But off of their website, you can link to their content, and then just like on our website, you can also see the Channel 99 from the high school available on our website. So what is the Public Advisory Commission developed for? And basically it was developed to help look at the fees that a cable commission receives from the cable television company. So each cable television company comes into the city and charges a fee, a franchise fee, to those people who get the services. That fee is then paid back to the city, and that fee can be used for a number of things, but originally was intended to be used to help develop the programming that is made available on those channels. So the purpose of this commission is really to help look at the programming of that channel, to deal with citizen complaints that might exist, and to deal with the fees that are designated by the channel. So you'll notice that there's a little bit of a variety of membership on this committee, somebody who's appointed by the mayor, someone from the city council, the public library has a representative, the school board has a representative there, as well as the city chamber of commerce. What was interesting is as I prepared to tell you a little bit about the commission tonight, as you hadn't been updated in a number of years, came to my attention that the representative of the school board actually needs to reside in the city or Clay Township, which then brought a new meaning to this proposal as well as an update to you. It also causes reason for you to make a new appointment at the end of this month. My commission with the advisory council actually expires at the end of March, and in essence I am not actually able to serve as an appointee to this commission because I do not reside within Clay Township. So it would come to your attention that you will need to make a new representative as well. Okay. So again, this is a review of what the PEG channel is, Public Education Government Channel. And the franchise fees that are collected by the City of Carmel are about $600,000 in amount. And we as a school district don't actually see any of those funds. Those all go straight to the city's budget. This is a little bit about the availability of these two stations, and as you may have heard from some of our constituents, it is not available currently on AT&T or Dish Network. You can only receive the channel either through streaming media on our website or the city's website, and then you can also receive them on Comcast or Bright House's network. We are currently in negotiation with AT&T and actually have received the last draft, hopefully, of a contract for them that is in our attorney's hand at this point, and then we hope to make a joint signature of that contract with the city. So that's one of the things that we really try to do as a part of this commission, is work hand in hand with the city so that neither of our channels receive any greater or lesser value for our community. Dish Network at this time, it is not anything that we're pursuing a contract to have the content available on that channel. With the government channel's budget, this is just a little information for you. Last year, they had a $25,000 budget to produce the content for that channel, and they had about $18,500 of that budget, or in addition to that budget for the maintenance of contracts. This year, the City Council actually approved a significant, for them, increase up to $75,000, and they maintained the contracts at the same rate. But you'll recall the overall amount of the PEG channel franchise fee is closer to $600,000. So they're getting about a sixth of the money directly dedicated to this station. With that, the station did win one of the national awards for being the best channel in the nation for public government channels, even with quite a lesser budget last year. So they were very pleased with that. The content for the city's channel, that's really what I'm here to mostly talk with you about tonight, because the content for the high school channel is produced and derived by students, part of the curriculum that we have. But the content for the city is currently selected with a representative from Omni Productions here in Carmel, who works directly with Nancy Heck from the city's public relations department. They work together, they plan content, produce new shows, broadcast all of the board meetings for the city, those types of things. And then how does this really connect with Carmel Clay Schools? Number one, you as a board get to have a representative serve on that committee. We work for programming for our constituents, and then we try to negotiate the PEG space simultaneously, as I mentioned earlier, like we're doing currently with the AT&T contract. But currently, the Advisory Commission was scheduled to meet tomorrow, and that meeting has actually been delayed for a little while, but they were scheduled to meet tomorrow, and so we're seeking some feedback from you for the Commission as to whether the Commission should advocate to the City Council to receive any of the additional $600,000 in funding. Some members of the Commission feel that when it was originally written, they were supposed to receive an additional appropriation that was never intended for that full $600,000 to supplement the city budget. So that's one piece that I would love to get your feedback on so I can report that back to the Commission. And then the second piece is whether the Commission should advocate for any neutral party to help to design the content or to write guidelines as far as the content is concerned, that type of thing, because there's some discussion as to whether content is swayed in any one way by any different political matter or party. So I would open the floor to you for a little bit of discussion about these two topics so that I might take your feedback back to the Commission.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Cloud. And so I will open it up to the board. Let's go with the first question. Should the Commission advocate for additional funding? And Mrs. Niles, please.
I would think that they would be able to receive more than $75,000 of the $600,000 that that city would not take all of that money. I know from being on the Parks Board that they also had discussions with the city about money that was coming into parks. But if you're going to do something and do it well, then you should be able to receive some of the funds that they bring in, instead of all going to the city.
Do you have any suggestion of a percentage that you might recommend the Commission consider? Okay.
Mr. Phillips.
Well, first of all, as a AT&T customer, I'm delighted to hear that I might be able to soon access the PEG channel. Secondly, I think I'm getting the impression that Carmel Clay Schools perhaps doesn't enjoy as much space on the PEG channel as we might like to have. Is that correct?
I don't believe that that has been brought to my attention as a concern, because the public channel, they have their own channel, and then we have a separate channel. So we actually have our own set of content. So that is not the concern. If the concern on the content that's being provided has more come up at the Commission level, and other members on the Commission have been concerned about some of the content that's being produced and how that content is being decided upon.
So could you give an example of an improvement that we might hope to see?
I don't know that the Commission has gotten to the point of determining what the content what new content might be available, but I think what some of the members are targeting is that if multiple people are providing input as to what the content is versus just one or two people playing into that you might have content that meets a wider variety of interests and likes from around the community.
Okay, and I guess my last question would be what would be some potential uses for additional funding if that were to be available to the Commission?
New equipment, should they need that equipment, new content, new shows, new writing, new scripting for those shows, more ability to go out and do that. If my understanding is correctly, they have a very small staff, so they might be able to add additional staff to provide additional programming and shows for the community.
Thank you.
I have a question. So in the 2013, the $75,000, is that split between the city PEG and the high school, or the district, or just the city?
All of this money goes to the city's agreement with them. The city is the holder of the PEG franchise fees, so they receive all of the fees. Those do not go to the schools.
So as part of your, okay, no, I'm not.
Do we get any funding for Channel 99?
No, we do not.
Okay.
Is that part of your request on that first bullet then?
No. This request is coming straight from the city commission.
Okay.
advocating for whether we should ask the city to provide more funding directly back to the city's channel. Would not impact the school's channel. Our role on this, while we want good things for our channel as well, we really serve on this to help with the government channel perspective and give our insight to that.
I have one more. You asked Pam for a percentage, and I was kind of like Pam. I'm like, okay, well, if I pulled out of a hat, but as a member of the council, do you have any data on what is a typical?
Typically, the national average was around 40%, but there have been declines in that nationally recently.
Okay.
That's close. You were close.
So when I get my cable bill, there's a little fee there, and that's where this $600,000 comes from.
Correct.
And it was geared to go to public, to the public channel.
It is, the original intention of the fee was for the public access channels. Now, whether the city determines to use it that way or not.
You don't have any idea what they're doing with the rest of the money?
I do not. It's appropriated in their budget. I don't know exactly where it goes.
Okay. Well, inquiring minds might want to know, but I'm with Pam. I think 50%.
Okay. And any feedback on the second bullet point?
Well, I'll let others weigh in.
I was just going to say, I mean, that one, as far as the first one, I mean, I can see the 50, 40. I think the discussion that you're bringing up is really part of the key part of it. And then the second, I don't even know why you wouldn't have guidelines. So I would think that makes total sense.
Okay, very good. Any other feedback?
Well, I concur with my fellow colleagues. Yes.
Fabulous. I will report back.
We like the neutrality.
At which we next meet and let them know that we would advocate for somewhere between a 40 to 50% rate being applied to the public channel, and that you would definitely like to pursue writing some guidelines to govern the content of that channel. Okay.
Thank you.
And then we'll come back to you at the end of the month to look for a recommendation on a new appointment.
And I do thank you very much for your service. I know you've served in this position for a few years, and we do appreciate it, and we wish you resided within the district, but since you do not, we will work on replacing that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on our agenda comes to Mr. Newman for support staff position changes.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Spanenberg. Bring to you, to the board for discussion this evening, a number of recommendations for support staff changes. And if it's all right with you, I think we'll deal with them kind of a point at a time. Then I can answer questions about that point, if that might be easier, because we do have a number of things here that we've recommended. The first recommendation, well, the first two recommendations technically have to do with EduCare, and actually the third does as well. As you all know, the EduCare program serves the employees of our district and their children, and that program was established 14 years ago. The initial year, that first year, Mr. McMichael tells me about 35 children were enrolled, and that program has grown substantially over the years. To a point now where we're over 200 children who are served technically this year at 3 sites, 2 of which are permanent, one that is inside of Clay Middle School, one that is inside of Carmel Middle School, and there also are portable buildings behind Clay Middle School that is used as a 3rd site this year. We are anticipating some changes with that organization in that the portable buildings, in our opinion, have reached the end of their useful life. And as such, Mr. McMichael and Mr. Farron will be working to look at some changes to Carmel Middle School that will accommodate the students, or more students at Carmel Middle School there than are accommodated this year. So we will end up with 2 sites next year, one inside of Carmel Middle School, one inside of Clay Middle School. So we have a change in the structure of the programming, and right now we presently have one director of Educare, and 3 lead teachers. In essence, 1 lead teacher for each of those sites. That includes 2 lead teachers at Clay, 1 for the portable, 1 for the inside the building. And then Carmel Middle has its own lead teacher as well. Our recommendation to the board is to eliminate 2 of the lead teacher positions, one of which happens to be vacant, was just vacated. And then that would leave us with 1 remaining lead teacher position. And then we would establish a new Educare Assistant Director position on Schedule 4, the support staff salary schedule. And it is important to note that we are talking about the support staff salary schedule there, not an assistant director on the administrative salary schedules. Those are very different schedules. We believe that configuration for next year with a director, an assistant director, and 1 lead teacher would better serve the needs of our programming. The assistant director and the director would have oversight and interaction over both sites. The lead teacher would primarily be housed at Clay Middle School. So that's the first part of the recommendation. That's actually numbers 1 and 2. And then number 3 also has to do with Educare, so I'll lump this in here if that's okay. We're recommending that the director of Educare be moved from Schedule K, which is the administrative assistant, benefits specialist, coordinator of community relations, various other positions, that schedule to a new salary schedule, Schedule M. And that, again, comes as a result of the significant growth over time in that program. And we think that is an appropriate next step for that position. So I'd be happy to entertain questions or comments about the Educare pieces of that recommendation, and then I'll move on to the other 2 pieces, if that's okay.
Yes, you said you're going to move the person to Schedule M. Schedule M has 9 steps. What step would they be moving into?
Right now, we think we'd probably move them to Step 6 on that new schedule, Schedule M.
Okay.
It's a 9-step schedule as well, as you'll see.
Okay, so K is are they at the top of K?
They are, yeah.
Okay.
They're at Step 9 on Schedule K.
And you said you'll have 1 lead teacher at Clay, and then where will the director be located?
Yeah, the director has offices, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. McMichael, but the director has office in both locations. She has space in both locations. I know from when I was a parent at Clay Educare, there were some days she was certainly there when I dropped off or picked up my son. Other times, I think she's at the Carmel site. So she's in both sites over the course of the week.
So who will be overseeing the Carmel site if there's no lead teacher?
The assistant director.
So the assistant director will stay at the Carmel one, and the lead teacher?
Yes, primarily. I mean, the assistant director could certainly come to Clay as well if the director needed for that to happen, but primarily the assistant director would be at Carmel Middle. And I don't know if I said this, but we're anticipating Carmel Middle being about twice the size in terms of the number of students as will Clay be, just given the facilities.
Actually, about 3 times.
About 3 times.
Be about 50 kids at Clay and about 150 at Carmel. And Pam, you're correct. Essentially, what happens at Carmel, realizing it will be about 3 times the size of Clay, the assistant director will, in essence, serve as the lead teacher does in the other in terms of day to day. But then the assistant director, so one, she'll have responsibility for 3 times the number of children. And then secondly, she'll have responsibilities beyond just Carmel in terms of the overall program, along with the director. And those, she would be there as the lead teacher currently is every day during when the kids are there. Mm-hmm. But in the summer, portions of the summer, they don't work the entire summer, but they work some after school and some before. And so at that point, then, they would be looking at things that would affect the entire program.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me what the requirements for the job are? I mean, what degrees? Do we have licensure? situation?
There wouldn't be specific licensure that we would have to maintain, I don't believe, but early childhood licensure would be a tremendous benefit to us. And I don't know that we would say that that's required, but that would certainly be a preference.
Yeah, it likely wouldn't be. We wouldn't anticipate it being required. The title of assistant director, you should put that in the context that it's on. The pay wise, it's on a support staff salary schedule. It's a Schedule 4, which won't mean anything to you in and of itself, but the beginning pay is about $16 an hour. It's in the same pay class as our payroll coordinator, a couple of the assistants, and the assistant, yeah.
Right. Computer technician.
Computer technician. Actually, the computer technician, too, the lower paid of our computer technicians. So, as Ryan said earlier, the title is assistant director, but it's not as you might think of other assistant directors, and it's certainly not at an administrative level.
For the director, would it be the same thing, early childhood?
Well, the director has been here since the beginning of the program,
okay.
And I don't know that she's degreed in early childhood. She has about 30 years experience in
because that I was just working it out to about $233 a day
for the director.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm not sure who to throw this to, Roger or Ryan.
Either one. We'll try.
Well, first of all, EduCare is a wonderful benefit for our employees, and I feel very good about the fact that this district offers that kind of benefit. I know it's appreciated by many teachers. I wanted to just make sure I was clear on this configuration from the dialogue. I think I understand that by consolidating that we're actually having, in effect, two locations, and that the reason for dispensing with the two lead teachers is that we'll have, in effect, one lead teacher at Clay, and we'll have the assistant director who will function as the lead teacher, but because of the additional responsibility of having so many more kids, that it's only fair to compensate them more. Basically correct?
That's accurate.
Okay. I did want to ask a question, and please regard this as just a thought about the future. I know we all like to look ahead, but given that EduCare is such an important benefit for so many of our teaching faculty, I wonder if we'd ever consider opening an EduCare facility at Creekside. There certainly must be a number of teachers that live on the west side that would appreciate having something closer than, say, Carmel Middle School. What are your thoughts?
Well, that's been requested and considered. We wouldn't anticipate that. When we started the program, we started in a separate building at Orchard Park along with this modular that we're referring to, and that's how the program originated. During the course of renovation of Carmel and Clay Middle Schools, we incorporated the program as a permanent facility, you might say, into those two buildings. We did not design it into Creekside when we built Creekside, which actually was first, and then we renovated the other two. We didn't do that because we didn't project that there would be sufficient enrollment to warrant that. And number one, and secondly, that Carmel in particular had additional space available that we just reconfigured and so it's convenient that we had more space there than we really needed for the middle school, and so thus used it for the child care program, and of course Carmel is somewhat centrally located in the district. So, well then, as Carmel schools continued to grow and this program continued to grow, we actually reopened the modular that we actually had abandoned years ago. In fact, the high school, what do we call it? Not the alternative school, but
Building trades.
No. The Learning Center. I'm sorry. The Learning Center was actually located in the modular prior to where it's at now. And with the continued growth of the EduCare program, we reopened the modular again as a child care center. However, now that the district has pretty much stopped growing, I would anticipate that somewhere in the future, as our staff ages and we're no longer hiring as many young teachers and so forth, that I'd want to be very careful in terms of expanding at Creekside, because I'm not sure that the program will maintain the enrollment over a longer period of time that it's doing now. At Carmel, we again have space available for the program, whereas at Creekside, even if we'd have done it originally, we would have had to build additional space for it, and it currently certainly doesn't have additional space that's just available. So with all that considered, we can improve our situation by going to Carmel, certainly as compared to the modular, with really very minimal cost, relatively speaking, because we have existing classrooms there. We're using one classroom now. We'd like to use 3 more. They're all right together. But we would do rather minor modifications to those classrooms, putting some doors from one to the other so it would connect it together and so forth. The largest expense will be to provide restrooms in the rooms that need them. So the space is there, and should we not need it in the future, it would be fairly minimal work if we wanted to reconvert it back to a traditional classroom.
Thank you for that background, and I'm sure that if conditions lend themselves to consideration of a Creekside location, I think you'll probably come back to us with that.
Yes.
Other questions? Great. Well, thank you very much.
Can I move on to the...
yeah, I guess there's additional parts. Yes, please.
We do have 2 additional pieces that we would recommend. These are separate from the EduCare discussion, so I want to make sure and make that clear. We talk about EduCare with the first 3 recommendations. The 4th recommendation, again, a totally different subject, we would recommend the moving of the benefits specialist position from the existing Schedule K to that new Schedule M as well, the same that we proposed for the Director of EduCare, and it's a very similar situation. The person who's in that position is on Step 9 of Schedule K and has been for some time. And we would, in terms of the cost, when Mr. McMichael calculated the cost of this recommendation, we assumed that position moving to Step 6 as well on the new Schedule M. So that's the benefits specialist. And then the final recommendation is really a very different one, in that we're recommending the moving of the database administrator position from Schedule 2, which is obviously an hourly schedule, to the salaried Schedule M, based on the degree of specificity in this position needed for this position and the work that the person in this position does. We believe, after analyzing the Fair Labor Standards Act, that this position meets the exempt status qualifications under Fair Labor Standards Act, which in essence is what would allow us to put them onto a salary as opposed to an hourly position. We have, in that regard, we've projected in terms of budgeting purposes for that person to go on to Step 4 of the new Schedule M, and we arrived at that information from taking a look at the hours and perhaps some overtime that was worked in the position, and tried to be sensitive, obviously, to not put the person into a salary that's less than what they would have been making as an hourly employee. Obviously, we wouldn't want to do that. So that brought us to the recommendation of Step 4 for that position. And as the bottom of the background information shows to you, the net impact of all of those changes, 1 through 5, is an approximate savings of approximately $3,000 for the district. So we've got a lot of moving pieces going on there, but when we look at the total cost, it actually turns out to be a savings as opposed to an additional cost.
Thank you. Questions from the board? Mr. Phillips?
A comment and a question. First, the comment. I think it's very smart to move the data administrator to a salaried position, because in my experience in IT, those kinds of folks can put in some unusual hours, and the importance of data to the work of the school is just incredible at this point. So he or she is a key resource. The question I've got has to do with the. I'm reading Roger's comment that the current lead teacher will continue to be employed as a teacher if she so desires. So do we have any indication of whether that person will be a teacher?
You're talking about the assistant director recommendation, Mr. Phillips?
Yeah. The answer is I don't know personally whether I would assume so. She was a teacher to begin with. Again, these titles, we start paying our lead teacher $1 an hour more than a regular teacher, and they continue to teach like 6 out of 8 hours. So certainly there's a difference compensation-wise between one and the other, but it's not maybe as much as you might assume based on the titles and so forth. So I can't answer your question. I don't know if she would be interested in continuing teaching or not, or if she's interested in the assistant director position. Right. And so we would anticipate, because of there's a significant enough change between the lead teacher and the assistant director, we think it would be appropriate to advertise that position and see who applies and so forth. But all three of the lead teachers were formerly teachers, so they were all three essentially promoted from within. Whether or not that will be the case with the assistant director, we don't know, but until we see who applies for the position. But we could have, for example, just taken one of the lead teachers and offered her the position as the new assistant director, but we thought it's more appropriate to advertise that position given the amount of change and so forth, and they may be, if they're interested, may be the best applicant. They may not be. But.
This is probably getting too deep into the weeds with HR, but if the current lead teacher, not the one who's resigning, but the current lead teacher elects not to become the assistant director, then that person would,
we will assure her a position in the center.
A teaching position.
At least. Yeah, so.
Other questions?
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And next, we're moving on back to Dr. Dillon to discuss some first readings for policy.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to bring some policies now for a first reading. First time I can recall that we've had overlapping policies. Second goes first goes second. Yes. I know, don't get too excited, I understand. Policy 2623, student assessment. This is a revised policy recommendation for Carmel Clay Schools. It was proposed by Neola, and it has been reviewed and modified by the policy committee. Just an executive summary of the policy. Current laws on student assessment have changed, and we anticipate additional changes on this subject in the very near future. In an attempt to provide current information to our community and to limit the policies that repeat current law, we are recommending this policy proposal that states that Carmel Clay Schools will abide by the current state law on the subject of student assessment and provide a link to the current law. These proposed changes have been reviewed by the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Dr. Dudley, and the School Board Policy Committee.
I open the floor to discussion. No, it's just discussion.
Oh, that's right.
That's okay. Any discussion on this policy? You're very excited, Pam, I can tell. Any discussion on 2623? Okay, moving on to the next policy, 5410.
5410, promotion, placement, and retention. This is a revised policy recommendation for Carmel Clay Schools, proposed by Neola and reviewed by the policy committee. Executive summary, the required retention based on the failure to pass the IREAD 3 assessment has been added to the promotion, placement, and retention policy. These policy revisions reflect the current state of the law and should be adopted to have accurate policies. These proposed changes have been reviewed by the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Dr. Dudley, and the School Board Policy Committee.
Discussion? Yes.
Do we have any idea if IREAD will continue to be the requirement of the state?
Currently it is, but with new Superintendent Ritz, I'm not sure if they will continue that. But it is a current rule in the state board.
So we'd have to revisit the policy if it changes.
Mrs. Hackett?
Actually, I'd just like to piggyback on what Mrs. Freed just asked. The previous proposed policy on the executive summary, it's gave the argument for a very brief policy so that we don't have to revisit it. But then this one is extremely spelled out, and so I guess where I'm going is why? Yeah, is there a reason behind this one being more detailed?
One of the things, this is an addition, as Dr. Dillon mentioned, we have the retention policy in place, and the IREAD piece was an addition. We felt like it was important to put that in policy because it is a, repeating some of the pieces that's in the law, but as making it very clear to parents, and we can direct them to see that these are the steps involved in that piece, and we felt like that was important to really spell it out very clearly all in one spot, knowing that if it does change, then we would have to go back and revisit that.
Well, that answers my question, but still thinking.
Mr. Phillips.
It's my impression, Dr. Dillon, that, and this is partly in response to Trish's question,
okay.
But it's my impression that the district is proposing here to accept the thrust of state law, which requires this. If you can't read at the third grade level, then you're automatically held back, which I'm going to imagine runs contrary to every instinct that an educator would hold dear.
Well,
and the extra language that we're seeing here seems to be an attempt to soften and to humanize an otherwise difficult edict that comes from someplace in downtown Indianapolis. Am I misreading this, or?
Certainly the requirement for retention based upon the IREAD 3 is a requirement of law. This is a recommendation from Neola that since that now is a possible retention for our students, that we should include that in our retention policy to have accurate and current policies. We would have to follow the IREAD 3 retention requirements regardless of whether this is included in our policy or not. There are many parts of this policy that are simply practice of Carmel Clay schools and not law, and so it would be difficult to simply say we'll follow the law in this case, because there's pieces of this that aren't law, that they are actually practices and procedures of Carmel Clay schools.
And
thank you.
Actually, if I could add, as we look at the retention, what the state board aligns is that retention is you best meet the needs of the students. So in actuality, it may not be that they are back in a third grade classroom, but they're getting their reading instruction at their level of need, but they may be in a fourth grade classroom. So retention is defined, and it's a local decision. And as we look at the needs of the students, we best meet the needs of the students in that area. So retention is not just that they're just back in third grade, as it would look.
I'm still left with the impression that we're making the very best that we can of a possibly bad situation. So I feel good about this.
Any other questions or discussion points on this particular policy? Okay. Next, 8310.
Policy 8310, Public Records. This is a revised policy for Carmel Clay Schools. Proposed recommendations for revision by Neola, and it has been reviewed by our policy committee. Just an executive summary. Revisions to this policy reflect compliance with the Indiana Access to Public Records Act. These materials recognize that APRA involves the production and protection of information, not records. So records containing partially disclosable and confidential information must have confidential information redacted and the public information disclosed. These revisions also recognize that there are mandatory exemptions, information that must be kept confidential, and discretionary exemptions, information that may be kept confidential at the discretion of the board. The revisions authorize the superintendent to invoke the discretionary exemptions because the APRA's short deadlines do not allow the board to invoke them. These policy revisions reflect the current state of the law and should be adopted to have accurate policies. These proposed changes have been reviewed by the School Board Policy Committee.
Floor is open for discussion. Mr. Phillips.
Thank you. Just the smallest of things, Dr. Dillon. At some points we refer to the records of the school board, and at other times we refer to the records of the corporation. Of course, they're exactly the same thing, but my old English teacher in high school would have probably circled that and said, be consistent. So
probably with a red pen. Mr.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. The other point, which is not worth hardly any mention at all, is that there's a paragraph where we talk about the hours of 8 to 4 o'clock when a person can request and so forth. That sounds less like a policy statement of the board than it is something that belongs in an administrative guideline. This wouldn't be the only policy on our books that has such detail, so it certainly would not be an exception, but perhaps our policy committee is, as we move forward with other policy, can look for opportunities to excise the details from policy.
Well, as part of the policy committee, Neola actually offered a very huge public records. I think, in fact, it was 7 pages long. Mm-hmm. We liked what we had. We added the 2 bits of information referencing FERPA and APRA, and our administrative guidelines spell out everything in gross detail. So
I don't
we
really
simply
have a serious objection.
I just wanted to share some of the conversations we
if you're
had.
offering this instead of 7 pages.
Yes.
Thank you.
They had many parts that we would have considered administrative guidelines, and we kept what we had and just added a couple references. Any other questions or discussion on this one? Excellent. Okay, moving ahead.
Thank you. Policy 8750, Defense and Indemnification. 8750 is a new policy for Carmel Clay Schools. It was proposed by Neola and has been reviewed by the policy committee. This policy provides notification that the board will follow Indiana Code 20-26-5-4, version B, 15 and 17, in making a determination concerning the defense and the indemnification of a claim against an employee or other authorized individuals. These proposed changes have been reviewed by the School Board Policy Committee.
Discussion.
I received a question from Greg regarding this policy and stating that he didn't think it was clear enough or didn't offer enough information. So I wrote a new suggestion to this policy, but have not received any feedback from board members today as to whether or not this is the preferred version, or you like the one that was presented tonight?
Ms. Freed?
I like Pam's version.
The new one?
Yeah, Mrs. Snell's version. Because when I look at this, it's brief and it's to the point, but I have no idea what IC 2026-5-4 version B 15 and 17 actually say. So from the standpoint of an employee or someone reading this policy, it's clearer to spell it out for them.
Mr. Phillips?
I did not read Pam's rewrite carefully, but I think in essence it does a very good job of answering the question that Kathy just raised. And it first came to my mind because we have a bylaw which is almost identical in purpose. In fact, it springs from the same statute. So being somewhat of a bug for consistency.
And this, we did recently pass a bylaw that talked about this same subject for board members. That was a discussion that the policy committee had. We wanted to offer the same policy and comfort to our employees and other individuals that work for our district in different capacities, to let them know that we would offer the same protections for them.
Just so everybody out there who is listening knows, we already practice defense and indemnification, and if there's an issue, it is our practice in the Carmel Clay schools that we protect our employees. So this is just icing on the cake by having a policy out there that actually states what our practice is. So,
and basically what I did was I just took version B number 17 and just reproduced it as to be our policy on this one. So it's just straight code.
Excuse me, there was one thing that I wasn't certain about. When we were defining who the other authorized persons might be that would be covered, that included parent-teacher organizations?
Parent organizations,
And if that's our current practice, is to indemnify PTOs.
And student teachers and volunteers. I listed those three just to give an example, but that doesn't mean that that's our limit. You know, whoever we indemnify, then we cover, then that's who would be covered in this policy.
Well, I, for one, would be more than happy to support the introduction of the rewrite that Pam offered.
Okay. And you received that today?
I did receive that,
okay.
And I believe that that should be an agenda item for our policy committee this Friday.
Okay.
Yes.
I just want to, I didn't get a chance to read it because I know the question came in late. The response was pretty quick, but it sounds like it's moving forward. I just want to remind the board, I think in the past, and the policy committee's been has been aware of this, that we try not to restate Indiana law, and so I guess this is one of those balancing acts we do. And so I haven't had a chance to look it over really, but just thought I'd throw that out there in our discussion.
Well, that was part of our discussion, and that is why we came to this single line, because what Neola had recommended referenced employees and referenced all these other groups as employee groups as well, which they're not employees of the board. So we needed a creative way to rewrite, and since we had decided not to duplicate the law, we simply made one statement that said we will defend and indemnify our employee and special groups.
And I do understand when we mentioned other authorized individuals in the policy, it does not specify who those would be. Mm-hmm. So that is a little unclear. So that's why I.
Glad you did.
Okay, so. Thanks. In our agenda, in our meeting on Friday, we'll discuss it and then bring forward something that's
Thank you.
better able to understand. Any other questions or discussion on 8750? Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Dillon. We look forward to meeting with you on Friday. And next, we're moving on to our workshop topic. English as a new language, and I invite Ms. Rachel Seaver and others. So please meet us at the podium.
Okay, good evening. Thank you so much for having us. We're really excited about this opportunity. I have the pleasure of coordinating our ENL program, and I'm here with Betsy Bullman. She's one of our ENL teachers, English as a New Language at Carmel Middle School. And actually, I have to brag real fast because Betsy and I were just talking before we came in tonight about a really exciting opportunity that Betsy has this summer. She was recently awarded a Lilly grant to travel to Tajikistan over the summer, and she will be teaching English to students there and also immersing herself in the culture and language of Tajikistan, so she'll be able to walk in the shoes of many of our English learners. So we're really excited for her, and we can't wait for her to come back and tell us all about that opportunity. So she's going to go ahead and start this evening's presentation, and then I'll be back with you in a minute or so.
Vielen Dank, Rachel, und guten Abend, meine Damen und Herren. Heute Abend möchte ich euch die Lernziele für heute Abend erzählen. Sie werden die evidenzbasierten Lehrstrategien für den Unterricht der englischen Lernenden erkennen. Zweitens, Sie werden die Leistungsdaten unserer englischen Lernenden evaluieren und Sie werden die Supportsysteme verstehen, die wir zur Lernentwicklung unserer englischen Schüler haben. Also alles klar? Nein. Also lass mir mal erzählen, bitte. Lehrziel Nummer 1, Dankeschön. Die evidenzbasierten Lehrstrategien für den Unterricht der englischen Lernenden zu erkennen sind solche. Und Lernziel Nummer 2, die Leistungsdaten, das sind unsere englischen Lernenden evaluieren, sind sowas. Und drittens, die Lernziele, sie werden die Supportsysteme verstehen, die wir zur Lernentwicklung unserer englischen Schüler haben. Also, thank you very much for playing along. You've just gotten to experience about 90 seconds of what our EL learners experience all day long in a school day. And we implement a variety of strategies, some of which you saw this evening, and then Rachel is going to talk a little bit more with you about the things that we do to help our students.
Thank you. So our learning targets for this little workshop presentation today are really threefold. We want to share with you the instructional strategies that we use for teaching English learners. We want to evaluate achievement data of our English learners and understand the support systems that we have in place for scaffolding learning for these students. Betsy just modeled for you some of the evidence-based instructional strategies that we use when leading professional development for our teachers, instructional strategies that we then hope that they will carry on with their students. So the first few here on this list you just had a little piece of. One, we like for teachers to begin their class period with the learning targets clearly defined, displayed, and reviewed, just as she did at the beginning of this session. Also, we encourage our teachers to emphasize key vocabulary. So hopefully what you noticed is when Betsy first began talking to you, she did not have any visuals at all for you. Then the first slide, if we go back, she had the written text. And so that probably helped a little bit to see that written text, maybe. And then, but you see, when we really dug down and looked at, okay, what would we really need to do to make this content more comprehensible for students who are learning this language as a second or third language? We thought, well, let's really identify key vocabulary. So on this slide, you see the word that means learning strategy highlighted. On this one, student achievement data, and on this one, support systems. So hopefully by highlighting for our English learners the key academic vocabulary within the learning targets, they are able to then derive understanding about the main takeaways that they need during the class period. Some other strategies that we really try to use in our professional development, and then that carries over in the work with our students, is using visuals to make content concepts clear. and then making explicit links between past learning and new learning. So as you know, the last time we had a workshop meeting, we talked a little bit about this iceberg image and how we do a lot beneath the surface to support our students in building the skills that they need to be successful up there in the Tier 1 general education experience. So today we're really going to dig in a little bit deeper with one little aspect of that beneath the iceberg piece that we have, which is the support structures that we have for our English learners. Listed here, you see some other instructional strategies that we use. We're not going to be able to model all of these for you today, but you'll also have a copy of this presentation after today. We didn't want to share it with you in advance because we wanted the German to be a little bit of a surprise. Before we dig into our achievement data, I want to kind of create a picture for you about our ENL population. We currently have 688 students who either have an ILP, that's an individualized learning plan, or they are being formally monitored by an ENL teacher in their school. So that population has grown quite a bit over the past few years. We also have 54 languages represented among these 688 students. So we actually have even more languages than this represented, but these are the languages represented within these 688 who are a part of our ENL program. So it's really exciting to see this great diversity within our community, and I can tell you that I receive an email alert every time a new English learner registers in any one of our 15 schools, and it's always exciting to see the language that pops up because we have a lot of unique languages within our school community. So you may be wondering how we identify students to become a part of our ENL program. And the first screener that we use is the home language survey, and there are 3 questions on that. What is the native language spoken by the student? What is the primary language spoken by the student? And what is the language spoken by the student at home? And if the answer to any of those questions is yes, then we administer a lost placement test. And that gives us an initial read on whether the student will need ENL services or not. So we determine based on that assessment if they are limited English proficient, that's a score of a 1 through 4, or fluent English proficient, that is a score of 5. So those students that earn a score of 5 are not a part of our ENL program. The students who earn a score of 4, we develop an individualized learning program for them, and then they become a part of the program. So you can see, as I mentioned earlier, that we've had quite a bit of growth in terms of our enrollment of English learners over the past 10 years. We've had a 230% increase in this population of students. We currently have 506 students who are identified as limited English proficient, and then about 180 additional ones, as I mentioned earlier, who are being formally monitored because they've just recently attained a level 5, and so we're just making sure we keep track of their progress so that they can maintain that long term. Here's just a quick glimpse at our ISTEP achievement. As our ENL population has continued to grow, we've continued to see fairly steady growth or sustainability in our percent passing for grades 3 through 8 in English language arts and math. As always, we continue to have room for growth, and we would like to see even more of our students reach that pass for English and math. This pie chart shows you our spring 2012 Lost Links results. Lost Links, as I mentioned earlier, when students first enroll, we administer a lost placement test. LOST stands for Language Assessment Scales. And that lost placement test that we initially give is a really quick measure that tells us whether or not we need to provide them with ENL services. But every January, the state law requires us, and actually federal law as well, requires us to assess our English learners. The assessment takes place late January and early February, and it assesses students in 4 areas: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And then they also receive an overall score. So our goal for all of our students is that they would increase their level of proficiency one level each year. So you can see, based on the spring 2012 results, that we did have some large group of students who did increase one or more levels. For our students who are a level 5, they have to earn 2 consecutive level 5s in order to be exited from the program. So we did have a group of students who solidified that level 5, which we were excited to see. And then we have our students who either maintained a level 1 through 4, then a small group of students who decreased one more level or more levels. So part of my job is working with our E&L teachers in the spring of each year when these results come back and digging into the students who maintained or decreased a level and really deciding what we need to do differently for those students moving forward to support them so that they can attain that additional level of achievement the following year. Another piece of achievement data that I thought you would be interested in are our annual measurable achievement objectives, which we call our AMAOs. And this is a requirement of No Child Left Behind. NCLB requires that we show progress toward 3 objectives. The first is to do with individual student growth. So we're required to show the percentage of our limited English proficient students who increase by 12 or more scale score points over the course of the year. So you can see that we were at 75%, which was above the state performance, and we did meet the state target. The second objective is to do with attainment. So there we're looking at the number of students that attain that level 5 of fluent English proficiency. And then the third objective is related to our students' achievement on English language arts and math on the I-STEP exams. And so we did meet AYP for the limited English proficient subgroup. So I'd like to tell you a little bit more about the structures that we have in place. I mentioned a little bit about this when we were working through our iceberg analogy about a month ago, but here's just a little bit more information for you. Our students at all levels attend their neighborhood schools. Dr. Dudley, I believe, worked hard to get that in place a few years ago. So, or it's been quite a few years now. So we have direct instruction targeting English proficiency for our level 1 and 2 students. So those students are typically pulled out, and an instructional assistant or other staff member provides these students with some direct instruction using core evidence-based materials. We also have differentiated classroom support for these students. What we've noticed is a lot of our students, when they first come, they really need that direct pull-out instruction. But over the course of the year, we lean more towards this differentiated classroom support where we have people coming into the classroom through a push-in support model, helping those students to really achieve the standard that's held high in the mainstream classroom. With all of the work that we've done throughout the district on the gradual release of responsibility, that has really set up a nice structure to differentiate for our English learners. These students also have accommodations per their ILP, or their individualized learning plan. They can also participate in targeted intervention depending on what the data tells us that they need. At the elementary level, our assistant principals, as you know, are half-time assistant principals, half-time differentiation teachers, and one of their big roles as differentiation teachers is to monitor the progress of our English learners. And so they work very closely with our classroom teachers on making sure the teachers understand how to implement the ILP, how to incorporate those accommodations in the classroom, and how to differentiate support as needed. At the middle school level, students also attend their neighborhood school. We have 2 courses that our level 1, 2, and 3 English learners are typically enrolled in. The first is the beginning E&L block, and it's a 2-hour daily course where once again they're using evidence-based core materials, and the language arts standards are embedded there. So they're able to get a lot of that E&L support in terms of building key vocabulary, but they're also focusing on the English standards that are taught in the mainstream classrooms. The intermediate E&L class is a 1-hour daily class that also targets English proficiency, and once again we do have a core curriculum there. we have clustered area content classrooms. One of the really exciting parts of my job last year is I was able to work with all of our clustered content area teachers, so science teachers, math teachers, social studies teachers, and working with them on what it looks like to differentiate instruction and shelter instruction for the English learners in the classrooms. And I can tell you the most rewarding part of that professional development is that time and time again they would come back to me and say, I'm really seeing growth in my English learners, but the best part is it's not just about that one kid. All the kids in my classroom are benefiting from this. So initially, even though I can stand in front of you and say we've had this huge growth district-wide, to a lot of these teachers, they may only have 2 or 3 English learners in their classroom. So when they attend professional development, of course, our teachers are ready to learn, they're excited, but they're also thinking, okay, I'm going to learn all this for these 3 kids, and I'm going to learn everything else to do with all the other kids. And what they came away from our professional development really understanding is that so many of these evidence-based practices benefit all students. At the high school level, it's really a continuation of a lot of what we have at the middle school level. We once again have the block courses. Our high school students have told me that they really, really enjoy having these block courses, especially with the new Common Core literacy curriculum that we have in our English program. They're really benefiting from having this 2-period block. We also have sheltered classes. Some of these classes have been around for quite a while, for instance, geography, history of the world, and some of the courses we've added newly since our population has grown. So we've just recently added the advanced composition and the algebra sheltered courses this year. In those courses, we aim to have accessible texts available to those students and teachers, and once again, differentiated classroom support and accommodations per their ILP. We also have an E&L study hall where those students are able to get additional help from the E&L teacher or other teachers in the building. And once again, we have an E&L teacher at both the middle and the high school level who that person has 1 period off per day. So I shouldn't say off, 1 period without direct instruction of students per day. And for example, Betsy has that 1 period where she can be monitoring students' progress, checking their grades, following up with teachers who might need additional help or support. And we found that model to be very helpful to both teachers and students. So in order for all of this to be sustainable, we need to continue to build capacity through professional development. So I work closely with our E&L teachers on providing this professional development. This takes place in the form of E&L focused professional development, but it also comes out in faculty meetings, lead teacher meetings, department meetings, where we are sharing evidence-based practices that are effective on meeting the needs of all of our students. We have some phenomenal instructional specialists that work with our teachers as well. So you can see that, I hope that you can see that it is a group effort and that we have a lot of people that are becoming very knowledgeable in terms of how to meet the needs of this population. With that, do you have any questions?
Well, thank you very much, both to Mrs. Bowman and to Ms. Sieber. That was excellent presentation, and I will entertain questions from the board. Mr. Phillips.
I'm just trying to imagine what it would be like to be a teacher and have some child come that speaks some language that, I mean, that was an incredible list of languages. It's not possible to have someone on staff that can speak all of that. How do you handle a child that just parachutes in from Azerbaijan?
Well, we do, all of our E&L teachers and our elementary assistant principals, I've done a training module with them on welcoming newcomers. And so a lot of that has to do with just the human aspect of welcoming someone into your school. In terms of instruction, we start with key vocabulary and help students to learn the key vocabulary, getting them acclimated into how we learn every day. So starting with those learning targets, it may seem like such a small thing, but that actually can lead to great student success pretty quickly because they're able to look every single day up and know this is what I need to take away from this class period today. And by highlighting that key vocabulary, I think that's a really good first step in addition to smiling and saying, you know, giving them a thumbs up that everything's going to be okay. We do have bilingual dictionaries that we get out to our students in the primary grades. We have illustrated dictionaries. So there are some resources in terms of first language support. But mainly our program is designed to really immerse them in English and help them to learn English at a pretty quick rate. And as soon as they make some friends, that helps as well with developing that social language. So we see the social language develop first, and then slowly but surely that academic language comes along as well.
You make it sound easy.
Oh,
Not quite.
it is fun. It's a fun.
Mrs. Hackett?
First, my probably very easy question, what is a sheltered class as opposed to an E&L course?
Mm-hmm. An E&L course is a course where you would see a group of students in a classroom and they're all English learners. So our E&L block courses at the middle school and the high school usually are class sizes of around 4 to 6. English learners who are there at the similar level of proficiency. They're really targeting those English skills. A sheltered class is a course where you would walk in and it looks like any other course at the high school, but those teachers have been trained or provided with professional development to put strategies in place that would specifically meet the needs of the small pocket of students in that classroom who are English learners.
Okay. And then just one more question. I know back it was around 2009 or so, and the district changed the staffing on how we addressed the E&L program.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the neighborhood classrooms was one thing, but I saw in the ISTEP scores they've gone up or stayed level. What, in your opinion, are some of the reasons for that success? Were some benefits? Change is always hard, but the ISTEP results at least were good. I don't know if you know that you see that going.
Sure.
In other
I'll
directions.
say something, and I don't know if Dr. Dudley would want to chime in as well because she's seen the full range of how things have changed. I can tell you, since I've been in this position, I've had the opportunity to work with the elementary assistant principals who it's been their job within the school to monitor the students' progress. Prior to that, we had a system in place where there wasn't someone that was in the school at all times throughout the day that had that role. And so I think that could be a large part of our success is that we have at least one person in every single building who's the go-to person to provide teachers and students with additional support as needed. So I think that would be one piece of it. I think another piece is just as we continue to really hone in on our evidence-based practices in the classroom, I think that has had a large payoff in terms of student performance.
And I would just add to that, the other piece is really looking at that shared ownership. As we had, our students we can meet their needs at any of our schools and really developing that capacity at all of our schools so as you have a student that comes into your classroom, you're able to meet their needs, and as Rachel said, there's a variety of strategies that we use that not only meet the needs of our English learners, but also needs of other students that might have similar needs. So I think that's another piece to the whole puzzle.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mrs. Mouse?
Yes. Since we have assistant principals in all the elementaries, do we have specific E&L teachers, or are the assistant principals considered the E&L teacher?
I guess they are considered the E&L teacher in that they provide the support, but they're not E&L teachers in that they don't pull groups of students and teach them.
So they don't
They're
teach.
Exactly. They're the ones who our progress monitoring to make sure the students are making adequate progress, following up with teachers. And so that's kind of their role. I guess that's how it's a little bit different, is at the secondary level, we have teachers who are actually teaching students and then also progress monitoring. At the elementary level, their main role is just the progress monitoring.
Okay, so
and providing professional
they
development.
provide support for the teacher in the classroom. So how does the teacher do adaptations in the classroom? Is that the responsibility of the teacher then?
Yes, the teacher is responsible for implementing the accommodations in the individualized learning plan.
But I mean, okay, so they don't have to create the adaptations, is what I'm saying.
The teachers are responsible for implementing the accommodations. So, for instance, if a teacher, if a student has the accommodation of small group testing, then it is the teacher's responsibility to make sure the students get that accommodation in their classroom. But all of it is really meant to be a fluid process where the teacher is looking and seeing, okay, what do my students need? And then is that reflected in the ILP? If it's not, then let's get that into the ILP. And we really want teachers to have ownership in that individualized learning plan, because if we had someone separate coming in and taking care of that, then it would be something that would not be a part of the teacher's school day. So we really want for teachers to take ownership in that plan, because they're the ones that are teaching the students, giving the students meaningful feedback, assessing the students. So they do have a lot of ownership in that. But they communicate with the elementary assistant principal on an as-needed basis.
Okay, and can you tell me approximately how many E&L students we have per building now?
It varies. I could pull the exact data for you and get it for you. I can tell you our largest population is at Orchard Park Elementary.
Okay.
And then second after that, I think, is Carmel High School. But I could pull for you the exact breakdown at each of the schools, if necessary.
Okay, I have one more question. When the high school students go to the English class and they are in a 90-minute English class on a daily basis, does that interfere with their ability to finish their Core 40 at the end?
That is something that we've looked at because we really want for students to be able to get that Core 40, but before we want to thrust them into all of those courses that they need for their Core 40, we want to make sure that they have the English they need to be successful in those classes. The vast majority of cases when students come in as freshmen or sophomores, it's a great fit for them to go into those block classes. We do have some situations where students will move into the district as juniors or seniors and want to graduate with that diploma, and that becomes a little bit more challenging for us to respond to that. This year we implemented a sheltered English class in the freshman center that is that every other day approach for students who don't have time in their schedule to do that double block. But it is something that I work with the counselors at the high school on a regular basis, is making sure that we design a program where students can get both the English they need and that Core 40 or whatever diploma it is that they desire.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, I just have a fairly simple question. You had commented that the students needed to get a 5 proficient 2 consecutive times. Now that test is only administered in January. So our students basically are in the program for maybe a minimum of 3 years, if not longer? Or what's the average time and support that, what's the average time that our students are enrolled in the program?
Sure. I can tell you I haven't pulled exactly the average of, it varies quite a bit, but I can tell, as if our students move along as we would want them to, which is 1 proficiency level each year, then they could be in the program for 4 years as a level 1 through 4, and then they would be monitored for actually 3 years after that, because they would be monitored the year after they earned the first 5, the year after they earned the second 5, and then we monitor them 1 more year with their grades just to make sure they're on the right track. We have many students that come in, though, as a level 3 or 4, so those students aren't usually in the program for quite as long. So it's a fairly...
And do you find that we're getting more students in the elementary age coming into the program, or are families moving here with high school students, or where are we seeing the most influx of students?
We do have lots of kindergartners. So in terms of the number of students that come in, I would say kindergarten is where we see a lot. But yes, many of our students are at the elementary, coming in at the elementary grades. So I would say that's where our highest percentage is right now.
And my last question, we were discussing earlier with regards to technology. I was wondering, what other type of resources are we using besides just a standard bilingual textbook for the students to acquire the English language maybe a little more quickly?
Right. We do have online software where the text can be read aloud to students, and we use that not just with our English learners, but also with other students who require that accommodation. We allow online translation tools, lots of those quick tools. Some of our students come with online translators. Bring your own device. We encourage that if they have an online translator that works for them. But we really encourage our students to be engaged in what's happening in the classroom. We don't like to walk into a classroom and see our English learners back by themselves on the computers. We want to engage them in the small group conversations and the rich environment of that classroom.
Thank you very much. Do we have other questions from the board? Well, thank you, Mrs. Bowman and Mrs. Seaver, for entertaining us this evening. I appreciate all the knowledge that you've been able to share with us. And with that, we're moving on to board member report, and I do believe Mrs. Hackett has something to share.
I do. Thank you. And really what I want to do is, first of all, thank anyone who's here or who will be watching, anyone who shared their thoughts for the characteristics needed to make the next, or to help the next superintendent be successful, whether it was through a specific stakeholder group or an open public forum or through the survey. We received over 500 individuals attending one of those, either a forum or to fill out the survey. That information is proving extremely, extremely helpful. That's really kind of an understatement. The school board's currently working with our search consultants to develop a final draft of this specific superintendent leadership profile, and actually we met in an executive session before this to work part of that process. And as this month and this whole process moves very quickly, look on the superintendent's search website in the next few days, I'd say, for that final draft to be there. We're now moving into phase 2 of the superintendent's search. Applications will be taken by BWP and Associates, the firm we're working with, until Thursday, March 14th. And then, using this leadership profile and our guidance from our consultants, the school board will select a slate of candidates for the initial interview phase. Throughout this phase 2, candidates are extended the courtesy of strict confidentiality. Now, to date, we are still on schedule with our originally proposed timeline and do anticipate selection of our finalists by the end of this month. Please check the superintendent search website to keep updated, because like I said, things are moving really quickly here now. I do anticipate another update at our March 25th meeting, at our next meeting, with hopefully the announcement of who will be our exact final candidates, if we can stay on time and everything goes as predicted. And I just want to remind you that the superintendent search website can be accessed on the district homepage under the hot topics. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Hackett. Any other board member reports? Any administrative questions or concerns you want to raise? Okay, and with that, I thank everybody for joining us this evening. Meeting adjourned.